A beautiful Georgian colonial mansion that once stood in Hartford, Connecticut, was built for a patriot who helped to achieve American independence. But he never got to live in the house, and it was torn down a century ago. Who was this house built for? Who ended up living there? And why was it torn down? This is History with me, Dan Sterner. Please hit the subscribe button as I bring you another historic house history. This house was built for Silas Deane, who has been described as America's first diplomat. Born in Ledyard, Connecticut in 1737, he attended Yale and later read law, but eventually settled in Wethersfield, Connecticut, where he married a wealthy widow and became a successful merchant in the West Indies trade. In Wethersfield, he erected a large mansion house. Completed by 1770, it reveals Deane's taste for grand architecture. Its brownstone steps likely once led to a covered front piazza that has since been lost. Today we only have a picture of a later porch. Instead of the typical center hall arrangement popular at the time, an off-center front door leads to a side stair hall with an elaborately carved balustrade. Deane entertained lavishly in the house's stylish parlors, where elaborate meals were prepared by enslaved servants. We can be grateful that his Wethersfield house survives today as a museum. A supporter of the American Revolution, Silas Deane was appointed to the First Continental Congress in 1774, and the following year he was sent to Europe on a secret mission by the Congress to secure supplies from the French. Deane was eventually joined by Benjamin Franklin and Arthur Lee of Virginia, and they were the three commissioners who finally signed a treaty of alliance with the French in 1778. According to tradition, while he was in France, Silas sent his brother Barnabas plans for a new house he wanted built for himself in Hartford. A substantial gambrel-roofed building, it would have high-style Palladian decorative features, including ornamental pilasters, a semicircular window above the front door, and dental molding along its rooftop cornice and triangular pediment. The interior parlors featured fine paneling and intricately carved mantelpieces. While Deane may have sent plans from France, much of the house's design can be attributed to its architect-builder, William Spratts. Originally from Scotland, Spratts was serving in the Royal Artillery with General Burgoyne's British Army that surrendered after the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. Spratts ended up a prisoner of war in the Hartford area, and after his release in 1780, he was hired by Barnabas Deane to build the house in Hartford. Spratts then moved on to a project in nearby Farmington, where he was hired in 1782 to greatly expand an earlier home on Main Street, the Zenas Cowles House, which is known as Old Gate. According to local lore, Spratts employed Hessian soldiers who had been his fellow POWs as carpenters. Like the Deane House, Old Gate also has a gambrel roof and similar exterior decorative work, but the Farmington house is even more elaborate, with a beautiful tripartite Palladian window above the front entrance. Spratts ended up staying in America after the war. He moved to Litchfield, Connecticut, where in the early 1790s he designed similar Georgian or Federal-style houses, such as the Julius Deming House, the Elisha Sheldon House across the street, and a house for Deming's brother-in-law, Epaphroditus Champion, in East Haddam, Connecticut. Getting back to the Deane House in Hartford, sadly, this substantial residence, once one of the grandest in the city, was never occupied by Silas Deane. In fact, he never set foot in it. Instead, it became the home of his brother Barnabas Deane, who was also a merchant. Silas fell victim to the political factionalism of the era. After the treaty signing, he was recalled to Philadelphia to account for government funds, which his enemies thought he had misused for his own purposes. Kept in limbo for a year by a hostile Continental Congress, Deane eventually returned to Europe in 1780, but he soon experienced financial reverses and declining health. He ended up in England, where he lived on the charity of friends. In 1789, he finally borrowed money for a return trip to America, but after boarding ship he became violently ill and died just before the ship left port. He was buried in an unmarked grave in the port town of Deal. After his brother Barnabas, another merchant named Daniel Buck owned the Hartford house, and in the later 19th century it was the residence of Nelson Hollister, a prominent businessman who died in 1897. The side bay window was probably added at this time. From 1902, the house was utilized by the Open Hearth, an organization dedicated to helping homeless men. The house once sat along Grove Street, with its side facing the street. Its front facade faced east towards the Connecticut River, which was the gateway to merchant trade with the West Indies at the time it was built. The Barnabas Deane House was torn down in 1926 to make way for a parking lot for the nearby Hartford Club. A few decades later, even more historic buildings in the area were cleared away, and it has since been completely transformed with modern construction. Now it's your turn. What do you think about the loss of the Deane House, and what do you think of the other buildings that I've shown in this video? Please leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.